What's going on, everyone? Darkside Phil here, and doing a special video today because today was a unique day, a day that I really wasn't expecting was going to turn out as it did. Today, the Mass Effect 3 free to download DLC called Extended Cut was released, and there's a whole bunch of backstory and controversy surrounding the situation and the release of this DLC. What I'd like to do is very briefly go over that, give you my honest thoughts about that, and then talk a little bit about, the DLC, if I liked it, explain to you the best way to go about the DLC if you haven't had a chance to play it yet. I know that a lot of my fans are international, and apparently the patch, I guess, isn't out in Europe yet. I think someone was saying that it's not out in Europe for whatever reason. And this will give you some good guidance for when you actually go to play the DLC yourself. So, alright. Mass Effect 3. Obviously, when the game came out, one of the most anticipated games of the year, one of the most anticipated games probably of all time, being that it was the third and final installment in this epic sci-fi RPG saga that's been, going on since I think it was 2006, or it was either 2006 or 2007 that Mass Effect 1 was originally released, and immediately became a very popular series by BioWare, by the way, a company who had already been known for really good RPG titles. Integrating an action third-person shooter I can't speak. A action third-person shooter style of gameplay with RPG elements, like being able to equip different equipment, leveling up your character, equipping different abilities, having different loadouts, and even different classes that completely change the gameplay of the game. In addition to that, having this branching structure where you don't necessarily have to do certain missions in a certain order, being able to actually have a dialogue trees that were some of the most complex of any game series ever made, that actually critically change your character, making them either have Paragon, which is like you say nice things to people, or Renegade, which means you're a bully and you say mean things to people, and also through your actions. Helpful good actions will give you Paragon, and these bullying negative actions give you this Renegade. And because of your choices you make during the game, sometimes they'll open up new dialogue tree options later on in the game that can drastically change what happens in the game. Also the fact that certain characters can die, certain characters can live, all dependent on your gameplay and what specifically you do and certain choices that you make. The promise that BioWare made that over the course of this series, that the integral choices that you make, such as should you save this series of killer insects because you think that it's not their fault that they've run rampant, or should you just eliminate them forever from the universe? Should you allow the Krogan to reproduce, or should you prevent them from reproducing in the future? Because at once they were producing so much that they almost took over the universe. All these different things during the series, choices that led into other things in the series, and the promise that this was going to pay off in Mass Effect 3. And so it is a pretty damn good series, in my opinion, one of my favorite video game series of all time. And so when Mass Effect 3 was released, I'd say probably about 95% of the game people loved. People absolutely loved. It wasn't until that very final chapter of the game, where it's the final showdown, you're rushing to the Citadel to hopefully stop the Reapers, and that's where it kind of broke down for a lot of people, because they said, take a look at the other Mass Effect games and compare it to the end of this one. The other ones had a big fight leading up to a build-up, maybe an epic boss battle or something. In this game, you don't get that. At the end of every other game, you got pretty much a nice explanation of what happened to the characters. You get to see who survived, who died. You get kind of an epilogue that will show you, okay, the series is going to continue. You don't get that in Mass Effect 3. Mass Effect 3, you got 3 cryptic choices at the end of the game, which kind of were a little bit confusing, were thrown at you out of nowhere. At no point up to this point in the game did you know that this kind of was coming. And the fact that there's 3 choices you must adhere to, and then when you pick them, which a lot of people didn't even know, but no matter what you pick, you almost get exactly the same ending. A generic cutscene that changes just very slightly depending on which ending you pick. You don't get any explanation really of what happened to any of your characters. You don't get any explanation as to why the Normandy was flying somewhere at the end of the game. And you don't ever really definitively find out if Shepard lived or died. It's really kind of cheesy. And I have mixed feelings about the ending of Mass Effect 3, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it. But what ended up happening was the fans who had felt invested in this game for such a long time basically flipped the fuck out. And they said, listen, this is BioWare. This is a company that we trust. They've made quality content up to now. How can you have such an epic spanning series? You know, these games last anywhere from, what, 10 to 20 hours? So if you've played all three of them, if you played them multiple times, I mean, what did you put, 60, 100 hours of gameplay into a game series? And you give us a shitty ending that doesn't explain anything. And being that this is the last game in the series, they kind of flipped out because there's no opportunity now for us to know what happened to our most beloved characters, to really get a definitive, clear ending of what happened at the end of this game. And the fact that there were also 3 endings and none of them were the clear ending that was the true ending, people kind of got pissed off. So I could kind of understand that mentality. Me, myself, when I played through it and I saw what they were kind of trying to do was leave it open to interpretation. Okay, there's this theme of choice at the end of the game, which pretty much when you think about it, the theme of freedom of choice has pretty much been the entire theme of the entire Mass Effect series of games. Where it was, everything you do could be a Paragon or Renegade decision. You choose your dialogue tree. You could choose to do missions differently, either in a violent manner or non-violent, you know, more peaceful manner. You could do missions in different orders. You don't have to do it by one conformed way. And so at the end of the game's giving you 3 separate choices to which you can choose which would be the way that you would actually like to end the game. And in my opinion, what they were going for was that any of those 3 choices could be considered a canon ending to the series, depending on how you want to play. I mean, after all, in the entire series, you were able to pick the good option, the bad option, or the middle of the road option. Why not give that to you at the end of the game? And I really think that's what it was. You have the good option, which is control, the bad option, which is destroy, and then the middle of the road option, which is synthesis. Everyone survives. Of course, even that being said, and me understanding that, it was kind of a cop-out of a lot of things that happened at the end of the game that just didn't have answers and were really confusing. Like, okay, at the end of the game, you're with your squad, you're rushing up to this spire to get to the Citadel. What happened to your squad? They vanished. Did they survive? Did they die? It never gets explained. Why was the Normandy running away from the Citadel at the end of the game? Did Joker all of a sudden become a fucking coward and decide to run like an asshole? Never explained. How did they know that that wave of light coming out of the Citadel was going to be something bad that was going to hurt someone on the ship? Never explained. Did Shepard live or die? Never explained. And it left so much open to interpretation and so many questions that, yeah, obviously I think the ending could have been better. I was okay with it because the theme of choice, which was the theme of the entire series, was still emphasized. But, yeah, definitely could have done a better job with a lot of these plot holes and such, okay? So here's what happened. When Mass Effect 3 came out in March of this year, 2012, and people started beating it, they started absolutely fucking flipping out, saying, this is ridiculous, this is disrespectful, BioWare took our money and basically robbed us of a quality ending of the series. People started demanding refunds, people started online petitions that they wanted a new ending of the game. It pretty much went pretty crazy, okay? And then conspiracy theories started opening up that maybe there was going to be another ending to the game that was going to be a DLC that you have to buy later on, which actually was happening with other games during that time period, like Final Fantasy 13-2 and Azura's Wrath. They actually didn't have definitive endings. You had to pay later to buy the real endings of the games. And people are just so incensed at this business practice that we've already gave you $60, why do we have to give you even more money to get the complete game? And it was already controversial because the game, Mass Effect 3, on day 1 had DLC for a character who was a Prothean, a really cool character, in fact one of the best characters in the game, who, if you don't pay for him or you don't buy the collector's edition, you don't get him, even though he was actually developed at the same time as this game. So it wasn't like it was anything additional that they did. There's actually part of this game that they were charging you extra to play as, people were up in arms about that. So now the rumors that there was going to be another ending DLC that they were going to charge you for were just, the internet exploded with rage, let's put it that way. And I think there's sometimes where it's worth it to do that if it's a good cause. I think sometimes when it's blown a little bit out of proportion, I think this was one of those times. I think a lot of people feel self-entitled, meaning they just feel like they deserve something for nothing. Now sure, you paid $60, but didn't you get a game? Yeah, you did. You got a pretty lengthy game, and by the way, what I had said when I actually reviewed the game was, I really felt that the real ending portion of the game is the build-up to that final rush to the Spire. When you're walking around these couple of buildings talking to all the characters from throughout the entire series, and some of them are giving you some additional information on what they're planning on doing once they actually go off after the end of this game. Like Jacob, oh, I'm going to go start a school or something. and Miranda, you're not going to see me anymore. We're going undercover because we can't be involved with Cerberus and all this other kind of stuff anymore. So you kind of get epilogue stories for all of the characters in the game, provided that you beat the game and you do win and you kill the Reapers. You kind of know what's going to happen with those characters. So I wasn't too disappointed. And I think some people just, they want the fucking world, and they just sound so whiny when after a game like this comes out, and you know the game was absolutely outstanding up to the fact that the ending was a little flat. People fucking completely, oh, I deserve better than that, and we're the fans, and you gotta kiss our ass, and bit, 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 bit. And I just think that sometimes it gets blown out of proportion with this whole sense of entitlement deal, okay? But that being said, I think the whole situation actually has turned out to be a positive thing, because now that this DLC has been released, and by the way, this DLC is absolutely free of charge. It's called Extended Cut, and what it does is it adds a couple, like maybe, I'd say probably 30 to 45 minutes of cutscenes onto the game. And it changes the endings of the game to be like a little bit more sense, and actually answers a couple of the plot holes and questions that were like appallingly apparent as you played the game. Now, let me explain to you how the DLC works, and then I'll explain to you what I thought about the new endings and such. The way the DLC works is you install it, and then there's two ways to do it. If you want, you can just start straight from that last Citadel scene. If you remember, you're right outside the spire that's going up to the Citadel. There's a checkpoint after you beat the game that auto-saves there, and you can resume the game at any time. The reason they did that is because they wanted you to be able to just run through the end of the game and get all three endings without having to do any combat gameplay. So you can do that, and you will get all 3 and or 4 endings of the game by doing that. You can just do that. But there's a couple minor tweaks, and then there's one critical cutscene that you will miss if you only do that. If you go back one mission, and you actually start playing from the Normandy at the Cerberus base mission, where you invade the Cerberus base, you fight the Asian ninja dude again, and you do all that stuff, there's another cutscene that's added. Now this cutscene actually happens, of all times, when you're running up to the spire that leads you to the Citadel. It happens literally like 20 seconds before that checkpoint where it resumes, where you can go into the Citadel, which is really annoying, because that checkpoint here, I think really what happened here was that they put that checkpoint there because when the game originally came out, they wanted you to be able to do all 3 endings without having to do any combat. But then there was this one startling plot hole that everyone asked to be filled, and they said, how the fuck did your teammates who were with you when you were running to that spire, where did they go? Did they survive? Did they get on the Normandy? And it's kind of weird because some people, I think I was one of them, had, for example, Edie in their party, but then later on in one of the endings it shows Edie on the Normandy coming off, and you're like, how the fuck did she get on the Normandy if she was with me when the Harbinger attacked Shepard, everything exploded, Shepard woke up and walked right into the spire? Where were they then? It makes no sense. It's a big plot hole. So, this is one of the critical cutscenes where BioWare said we need to answer directly the fan question, and that is a good challenge from the fans. They added a cutscene where the Normandy flies in, dodging the Harbinger's rays, picks up your teammates. Your teammates actually want to stay with you. You're like, no, you got to get out of here. If anyone's going to be sacrificed, it's got to be me because I've been here since the beginning. And they take off, and then you just run for the spire by yourself. That's when the big explosion happens, and you get knocked out, and it continues from that checkpoint. Is it worth it necessarily to play that whole fucking Cerberus mission over to get to that point and see that one cutscene? Not really. I actually recommend that everyone downgrade your difficulty to narrative and just blow through it because it's really easy if you do that. But it was a cool way for me to re-immerse myself into the game and to see those final scenes again before we got into it, because I haven't played the game for 3 months and I thought it was a pretty good refresher, okay? I just think it's interesting that BioWare caved in to these fans' demands and said, alright, we're going to release this free DLC to directly answer some of your questions and challenges because there's been such fan backlash. It's the very first time I think I've seen anyone do anything like that. They kind of compare it to a long-ass time ago. I know most of you are not going to understand this reference, but Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is the author of the Sherlock Holmes series of books. And at the end of one of his books, he was intending to end the series. And what happened was Sherlock Holmes and his archenemy, Professor Moriarty, fall off of this giant cliff, and supposedly they're both dead at the end of the book. They're both presumed dead, and the book ends. And he was going to write off the series and say, I'm done. But what happened was the series was so popular and the ending was so cryptic and not an ending that was definitive. thousands of fans wrote and complained. It was in the papers. We want this series to continue. You can't just end it like that. You have to have a better ending. And he ended up actually starting up again, writing the books, and actually was making it a cliffhanger ending that they didn't die, either of them, and wrote a whole bunch more Sherlock Holmes books and made a shit ton more money off of it. Now, I'm not saying that that's what BioWare should do, that they should retcon the whole ending of Mass Effect 3 and then keep going with the series, but I thought it was interesting that they actually directly responded to fan concerns and made this additional DLC. Okay, so what does the DLC add? It adds additional cutscenes at the end of the game, no matter what choice you make, directly explaining what happened to the characters, who survived, who didn't. Actually shows a very touching scene in all three major scenarios, where the crew, the surviving crew, actually put up the nameplate of either Admiral Anderson if he dies, because I never was able to save him because I never played the game twice, so I didn't have Max Paragon or Max Renegade where I could save him. But yeah, Admiral Anderson, and then they put up Commander Shepard's name plaque on the deceased wall of the deceased that's actually on the Normandy. That, remember, upgrades or updates during the playthrough. Remember when Warden died, his name got on there and such? Well, they add those names at the end of the game. It's a really touching scene. Obviously, I want you to watch the videos. I don't want to spoil anything too much, but I definitely like the fact that there's the three same choices, but it more definitively explains who survived and what happened because of those choices. I think it's done much better than they did in Mass Effect 3's original endings, where it was supremely cryptic and nothing was really explained. Don't get me wrong, there's still some really cryptic stuff that goes on. It's very unclear whether or not Commander Shepard lives or dies in a couple of the endings. It's very unclear if he survives in any of the endings, although one of them it seems like he may. But I'm not going to spoil that for you and tell you which one it is. It also, at first glance, it makes you seem like there is no canon ending yet again, like you don't know what the real ending of the game is, if there even was one intended. However, there is a fourth secret ending, which really isn't too secret, but you couldn't do this ending in the first Mass Effect 3, so I want to tell you how to do it. And I don't really want to spoil it in this video because I think it's really cool. And I think if you watch the last video of my playthrough of the Extended Cut DLC, you'll see, wow, that was really neat what they did there. But it actually, for me, is the definitive ending. And just to let you know, the way that you do it is basically you don't make a choice. You have to find a way not to make a choice. Because you're given the three. You're given control the Reapers, destroy the Reapers, or synthesize synthetic and organic life into one. Those are your three choices. Well, there's a couple ways that you can not do those, okay? And I say a couple because I actually discovered a way that no one else knew about, because everyone was telling me, Phil, just do this, just do this. Well, I said, well, wait a minute. I see some interesting things going on in the dialogue options, and I was able, just through the dialogue options, to find a way to not make any of those choices. And the thing is, it gives you an additional cutscene at the end of the game that's different, and this is the cutscene I'm talking about after the credits, okay? So you have to either watch or skip the credits. The cutscene at the end of the game changes and explains what happened, and in my opinion, out of all the endings, I think that is probably the best ending for the Mass Effect universe, because it goes along again with the theme of choice. You made your own choice. You were said you could only pick door number 1, 2, or 3, and you basically said, fuck you, human beings are about freedom of choice. We do what we want, and we will survive the way that we want to. We're not going to do A, B, or C because you tell us those are the only things we can do. We'll find another way, if that's what it comes down to. And really, that is what it comes down to with this particular ending. And I like the way that maybe necessarily isn't the most happy of endings, but it does have a positive resolution to what's going on. And so, let me kind of end my thoughts here about the Mass Effect 3 DLC by saying this. It's definitely well accepted. I don't think BioWare had to do it. I think that they really do have either a connection with the fans, or they were actually afraid that they had just pissed off so many fans that if they didn't do something for free like this, that they might lose a lot of fan base and a lot of people who normally were very big supporters of their company and them as a development company. The DLC adds some definitive closure in some ways. In other ways, it leaves it open, which is fine for me. Again, I like the fact that the whole theme of the game has always been choice. So give me the choice to end the game however I want, whether it's the Paragon, the Renegade, the middle of the road, or this new independent fourth choice that actually, when you think about it, really does spearhead the real feeling behind the entire game, that I'm going to rise against this oppressor who's telling me I can only do A, B, or C, and I'm going to do D because it's my freedom to do what I want with my life. And that, I really think, is the coolest ending of the game, the best ending of the game. I think you should all check it out if you don't play the DLC yourself, okay? So I tried to be as spoiler-free as possible. I did tell you about one scene, but it is what it is. I really like the DLC. I'm not going to rate it, obviously, because all this is a bunch of cutscenes, but it's a great way to end Mass Effect 3 on a high note rather than on the low note that it ended for a lot of people back in March. The fact that it was a free DLC, but they were still willing to work on it, means that they actually cared about the fan base, and I really liked it. I loved going back to Mass Effect 3 one last time to experience it, to play through it, that last sequence one last time. And now I really feel closure. I feel like that series, I've had enough. At least if they go back to the Mass Effect universe, it could be a different story. It doesn't have to be the story of Shepard and his friends. It could be a completely different story set in that universe, and I think that would be really neat. So, Mass Effect 3, Extended Cut DLC, it's worth checking out, especially if you like Mass Effect and you want a little bit more explanation. It's worth it. You don't have to replay the game 100 times, which all you have to do, if you want to see that one cutscene leading up to the Spire, you do have to replay the Cerberus mission. Once you get there, you're already going to have a checkpoint at the Spire. So once you beat it once, you just reload that checkpoint, go through that maybe 15-20 minute ending sequence again, and then do a different choice at the end to get the next ending. That is the one complaint I do have, is that if I want to see all the endings, I have to continuously, repeatedly play the end of the game over and over. It was really annoying for me because I wanted to do other stuff today, but I ended up playing the Cerberus mission and the final mission leading up to the Spire for 2.5 hours. Then I ended up doing an hour and a half of just the 4 endings, and now, giving my thoughts and like this. My day's shot. I've just spent like 6-7 hours, just on Mass Effect. I don't have time to do anything else. So if you do want to get all the endings, definitely leave yourself enough time to know you do have to go through the ending of the game repeatedly to get them all. Okay? Alright, that is it for my feelings on the Mass Effect Extended Cut DLC. Definitely check it out since it's free. It's a no-brainer, especially if you're a fan of Mass Effect. You're definitely going to like these endings better than the original endings that they put in there. So, I'm DSP. Thanks a lot for tuning in, and I will see you for more gameplay. Peace.